Imagine walking into a sweltering apartment in the middle of a Texas summer. You step over scattered coins near the entryway. You see a kitchen window completely shattered, with glass just sprayed all across the linoleum.
Yeah, and the heat in those second-story apartments, it just hangs there in the air, making everything feel even more suffocating.
Exactly. And as you look across the room, there's a bloody, broken acrylic fingernail lying on the carpet. The door itself shows signs of a frantic struggle, with a heavy wooden coffee table shoved completely out of the way.
A barricade.
Right, a barricade. Now, I want you to imagine a local sheriff walking into that exact same room, looking around at all that undeniable physical chaos, and writing down a single word on his notepad: suicide.
It's honestly baffling. When I look at crime scene files, this is a profound example of institutional tunnel vision.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at a case where the physical evidence literally screamed murder, but the authorities, well, they just covered their ears.
They absolutely did. When investigators decide on a narrative, before they even process the scene, the actual physical evidence becomes an inconvenience. They start building a conclusion in search of evidence.
Which is basically drawing the bullseye after you've already shot the arrow.
Exactly. It's backwards investigating.
And that is exactly the dynamic we are unpacking today. We have this incredible stack of source material to go through with you: case files, crime scene photographs, autopsy reports, and personal investigation notes.
And we should mention where these came from. These originate from Jolita Wilkinson, a woman who has spent decades fighting to correct the historical record regarding her sister's death.
Yeah, she's been incredible. And the mission of this deep dive today is to bridge that terrifying gap between a rubber-stamped police report and a physical crime scene that was just entirely ignored.
To really understand how this happened, we have to transport ourselves to the setting. It's the 1980s in Flatonia, Texas.
Small town Texas.
Very small, isolated, tight-knit. The kind of place where local politics dictate reality. We were focusing on a cramped studio apartment situated right above a local saddle shop.
And it was inside this room that 20-year-old Rowena Wilkinson Zapalek was found dead.
She was just a young mother, a talented rodeo rider.
And the Fayette County Sheriff's Office arrived at that apartment above the saddle shop and almost immediately closed the case.
Just packed it up.
Literally. Their official ruling was suicide by autoerotic asphyxiation.
Which is, from a purely historical and forensic standpoint, that ruling is a massive red flag.
Because of the statistics, right?
Yes. Autoerotic asphyxiation is a heavily documented forensic phenomenon, but it has historically been overwhelmingly associated with men. The source material references a study in the American Journal of Forensic Medicine and Pathology.
Right, I saw that.
Yeah, notes the ratio is roughly 50 men to every 1 woman.
50 to 1. So it's not just uncommon. Prior to 1980, the data shows there were only 2 recorded cases of women dying this way in the literature, too. Right.
So for a small-town sheriff to walk in and immediately jump to a conclusion that is statistically a unicorn, it requires a willful suspension of logic.
It does. It requires investigators to completely ignore the totality of the environment. They focused on 1 or 2 salacious details: a nylon rope tied to an iron bed frame, a sex toy on the bed, and they used those to build a convenient box.
And that box was handed to a grieving family who was just expected to accept it.
Accept it and stay quiet.
But the family couldn't accept it because they actually saw the room. The day after Rowena's body was removed, her teenage sister, Jolita, and their father went to the apartment to clean it out.
And the scene they walked into, it was a physical impossibility if you believe the police report of a solitary accidental death.
Let's walk through exactly what Jolita found, because none of this made it into the official sheriff's report. First, the door lock didn't even work.
Completely broken.
Right. The police noted that a neighbor had to push the door open, dislodging a coffee table. Rowena had clearly used that heavy table as a makeshift barricade. And you don't barricade a door against yourself.
Exactly. You do it because you are trying to keep someone out.
And when you look at the floor near that forced door, there were pennies scattered everywhere. As an investigator, looking at crime scene reconstruction, a scattering of coins or small objects is a classic indicator of sudden, violent kinetic energy.
Like someone kicking the door in.
Yes. Someone forced that door open, the barricade scraped violently across the floor, and whatever was resting on it just went flying.
Then you have the shattered kitchen window, glass everywhere. Jolita finds a broken acrylic nail covered in blood lying near that barricaded door.
Defensive trauma?
And perhaps the most haunting detail of all, when Jolita goes into the bathroom, the shower is still wet.
Yeah, that part is chilling.
This is a full 24 hours later in a hot Texas apartment in the summer.
That wet shower is a critical anomaly. Moisture evaporates quickly in that kind of sweltering environment. A wet shower a day later suggests someone used it well after Rowena was deceased.
Like to wash off blood?
Most likely, yeah.
Yeah.
But we really have to look at the broader failure here, which is the total lack of crime scene preservation. The responding deputies stood in that room. They stepped over the broken glass.
Jolita's father even physically handed them the bloody fingernail, didn't he?
He did. He picked it up and handed it to a deputy.
Yeah.
And all of it simply vanished from the official record.
This brings up a massive contradiction for me. If the physical space was that chaotic and there was that much obvious evidence of a struggle, how did the medical examiner sign off on this?
Well, that's the thing. Surely an autopsy would reveal the difference between a solo accident and a violent physical assault.
Oh, it did reveal the difference. The autopsy absolutely showed it was an assault. But the family didn't know that for decades.
Because they couldn't get the records.
Right. In the 1980s, in rural Texas, you didn't question the sheriff. The family was just crushed by the stigma of the official ruling.
It wasn't until years later, after her parents passed away, that Jolita finally obtained the full, unredacted autopsy report. And the medical data inside completely dismantled the police narrative. It's undeniable.
Let's break down the forensics for you listening, starting with that bloody acrylic nail Jolita found by the forced door.
Right. The autopsy explicitly documented that Rowena's forthright fingernail was missing. It had been violently ripped off.
Crucially, it wasn't found next to her body by the bed where she supposedly died.
No, it was found across the room near the point of entry. In forensic terms, that is, textbook defensive trauma, she was fighting back near the door.
And there was biological evidence of another person in the room, too.
Yes. There was unidentified semen found on the bed sheets and inside her. Now, this was before DNA testing was widely available, so the lab typed the fluid only as containing an H substance.
H substance. What does that actually mean?
To understand that, we have to look at 1980s serology. Back then, forensic scientists relied on secretor status. About 80% of the population secretes their blood-type antigens into their bodily fluids, so sweat, tears, saliva, semen.
So if you leave a biological fluid at a scene, they can test it to figure out your general blood type.
Precisely. The presence of the H substance suggests the individual might have had type O blood. However, the testing back then was so rudimentary that the lab noted they couldn't definitively rule out a weak type A or type B.
So it was practically useless for identifying a specific suspect.
Pretty much. But it was absolute, definitive proof that another biological entity was present in that room.
It proves she wasn't alone, period. And the toxicology report paints a very similar picture. She had a blood alcohol level of 0.07.
So it's maybe a couple of beers. Not heavily intoxicated at all.
Right, but investigators noted a half-smoked marijuana roach sitting in an ashtray right next to the bed, yet her toxicology showed zero marijuana in her system.
So someone else was sitting there smoking it.
Exactly. But the most undeniable piece of forensic evidence, the one detail you absolutely cannot explain away as a solitary accident, was the bruising.
Yeah, the bruises are the smoking gun here. The medical examiner documented 4 symmetrical linear bruises on the inner aspect of both of Rowena's upper arms.
And the wording the medical examiner used in the report is just chilling.
It really is. The report explicitly states that the size and aspects of the bruises suggest they were the result of the subject being gripped from behind, with the fingertips producing the 4 separate bruises on each side.
Let's just visualize the mechanics of that for a second. You do not grip your own upper arms from behind.
No, anatomically it makes 0 sense.
Somebody stepped up behind her, grabbed her forcefully by the arms, and left finger mark bruises. The autopsy proved murder, yet the authorities buried it. How did they logically justify closing this case so quickly when they had a medical examiner telling them she was grabbed from behind?
Well, they relied on a rationale that collapses the second you apply any critical thinking to it. Their logic was built on 3 really flimsy pillars.
Okay, let's go through them.
The first was an X-ray receipt they found in her closet. The police theorized she had received terrible medical news and, took her own life in despair.
Which is an incredible leap and entirely false. The family confirmed it was just a routine precautionary mammogram.
Right. The women in their family had a history of hereditary breast tissue conditions, so Rowena was just being proactive about her health. She was perfectly fine.
So pillar 1 is garbage. What's the second?
The second pillar was purely hearsay. They took a rumor from a man named Joel, who was Rowena's boss at a local barbecue joint.
Okay.
He claimed Rowena had once overdosed on pills. But the police never verified this. Her family had never heard of it. Her ex-husband had never heard of it.
Even her aunt, who was literally the town doctor, said there was absolutely no medical history of an overdose.
So they took a single rumor from a barbecue restaurant manager over the actual town doctor.
Incredible. And the third piece of their so-called evidence was no sign of forced entry.
Which makes absolutely no sense because we know the door didn't even have a working lock.
Right. She used a coffee table to barricade it. The coffee table was shoved across the floor, the screen was pushed out, and the window was shattered. How do you force entry on a door that doesn't lock?
You don't. The sheriff's department exhibited severe cognitive dissonance at the institutional level. They found the rope, made a snap judgment, and then actively filtered out the broken glass, the defensive wounds, and the barricade.
Yeah.
Because those facts, well, they complicated the paperwork.
They chose the easy way out. So decades pass. The paperwork gathers dust. Jolita grows up knowing her sister was murdered and knowing the local cops just covered their eyes. And then we hit a massive twist in the timeline.
A huge twist.
It's 2006. The Texas Rangers suddenly reach out to Jolita, but they aren't calling to apologize for the botched investigation. They ask her if Rowena knew a woman named Melody Bush.
And Melody Bush is the key that unlocks the wider context of this entire town.
Yeah.
6 months before Rowena was found dead in that apartment, Melody Bush was murdered in the exact same small town.
Melody was found dumped in a culvert just north of Flatonia. Her cause of death was acute acetone poisoning.
Now, acetone is essentially nail polish remover. To die of acute acetone poisoning is highly unusual in a homicide.
Yeah, how does that even happen?
Well, it has an incredibly strong chemical odor and it burns severely. A victim doesn't just casually ingest or inhale a lethal dose of acetone without realizing it.
So it's not like slipping poison into someone's drink.
Not at all. From a toxicological standpoint, it requires overwhelming force. You either have to force someone to drink a massive quantity, or you have to force a heavily soaked rag over their face until they inhale enough highly concentrated vapors to shut down their central nervous system.
That is horrifying.
It is a brutal, physically demanding way to kill someone. It implies incapacitation or a violent, drawn-out struggle.
And the geographic overlap here is eerie. Melody was last seen alive at a local bar called the Stag Club. That is the exact same bar Rowena had been partying at on the last night of her life.
Same town, same bar, 6 months apart. But the Texas Rangers were looking into this connection not because of local police work, but because of a letter.
Right. A serial killer named Robert Charles Brown was sitting in a Colorado prison.
He was claiming up to 48 victims across the country, and he wrote this cryptic letter to detectives demanding money for information.
Classic serial killer playing games.
Exactly. He claimed he killed a woman in Flatonia, Texas, around 1984 or 1985.
He specifically wrote, and I'm quoting here, Flatonia ether ice pick, meaning he supposedly used ether to knock a woman out and an ice pick to stab her in the heart.
The Rangers were wondering if this roaming serial killer got Melody, and maybe he got Rowena too.
But let's look at the mechanics of this confession because the modus operandi doesn't match at all.
Not even close.
Melody died of acetone poisoning, not an ice pick to the heart. An ice pick leaves a very specific, undeniable physical puncture wound. And Robert Charles Brown is sitting in a cell asking for cash.
Yeah, this looks like a textbook case of a killer seeking infamy by reading local newspapers and claiming unsolved murders to mess with the cops.
That happens a lot, doesn't it?
All the time. And from a criminal profiling standpoint, Brown is a terrible fit for Rowena's murder. When we evaluate serial offenders, we look at their signature, the psychological need they fulfill through the act versus their MO, which is just how they pull the crime off.
Right.
Brown's claims were scattered everywhere. Strangulation, shooting, chloroform, ice picks. But when you look closely at Rowena's crime scene, it lacks the hallmarks of a random roaming predator.
Right, because it was highly intimate. It was inside her home. The door was barricaded from the inside. She knew someone was coming, or she was terrified of someone specific in her orbit. A passing truck driver doesn't usually inspire you to barricade your second-story apartment door with a coffee table on a random Tuesday.
Exactly. The scene implies a level of familiarity. It implies proximity. So if we discard the serial killer theory as just a distraction, we have to look inward. Who is in the orbit of both Melody Bush and Rowena Zapalak?
And this is where the source material gets incredibly dark. When you meticulously cross-reference the timelines of both dead women, a single name overlaps in both investigations.
Cooper Cherry.
Let's construct the timeline surrounding Melody Bush first. The night she disappeared, she was at a seedy motel in Flatonia, engaged in a heated fight with her husband.
They were partying in that motel room with two other men. One of those men was Cooper Cherry.
After the fight, Melody storms out, goes to the stag club, and is never seen alive again.
Now, apply Cooper to Rowena's timeline. On the last day of Rowena's life, she actually dropped her young son off with Cooper.
Why would you do that?
Because Cooper's ex-wife was a woman named Ruby Cherry. And Ruby was Rowena's neighbor, living right across the hall of that saddle shop.
And it was Ruby who supposedly found Rowena's body the next morning.
Yeah, we really need to critically analyze the witness statements from the morning of the discovery. In the immediate aftermath of Rowena's death, Ruby Cherry gave a statement to the police.
And it was a weird statement.
Very weird. She claimed that on the morning Rowena was discovered, her ex-husband, Cooper Cherry, and his best friend, Bart Moore.
Who, by the way, was also out at the stag club that night.
Right. They showed up at her apartment unannounced.
Their excuse for showing up was that they supposedly had no hot water at their own place, and they asked to use Ruby's shower. Ruby says she left for work and let them stay.
Let's connect that statement back to the physical evidence Jolita found a day later.
The unexplainable wet shower. Jolita found the shower in Rowena's apartment still wet.
Yes.
If Cooper and Bart were next door, supposedly using a shower because they needed hot water, what if they didn't use Ruby's shower at all? What if they forced their way into Rowena's apartment across the hall?
What if they used her shower to wash off the blood?
Exactly.
It perfectly aligns with the physical reality of the scene. The wet shower, the forced door with the scattered pennies, the missing fingernail from a struggle, the symmetrical bruises from being gripped from behind by a man.
It's all right there.
And when you scrutinize Ruby Cherry's statements to the police, they fracture under pressure.
What do you mean?
Well, to the local sheriff, she said she woke up at 9:30 in the morning and went to a babysitter's. To the justice of the peace, she claimed she went to work at 11. Later, to the Texas Rangers, she said she woke up at 9 and went back to sleep.
When someone's timeline shifts that dramatically depending on the badge of the person asking the questions, it's a massive indicator of deception.
Absolutely.
But if you think two dead women connected to one man's orbit is a statistical anomaly, brace yourself. There is a third woman in this web.
Yeah, in 1980, several years before Rowena and Melody, Cooper Cherry's first wife died. Her name was Rhonda Stahl.
They had been married for less than 10 months.
She died in a highly suspicious single-car rollover on a rural stretch of road near some train tracks.
And the details of Rhonda's death are just baffling. Supposedly, she rolled her car, was thrown from the vehicle, and the car landed partially on the train tracks before being clipped and pushed aside by a passing train.
A completely chaotic scene.
And the state troopers arrived on the scene and decided, without a single eyewitness, by the way, that she probably just fell asleep at the wheel.
Her official cause of death was listed as intracranial trauma.
Which means what? Medically?
Medically, that means she suffered severe bleeding or swelling inside the skull, usually resulting from high-impact blunt force. Now, that could certainly happen in a rollover crash.
Sure.
But it could also happen from being struck in the head with a heavy object before the crash ever occurred. The only way to differentiate between a staged crash and a genuine accident is a thorough post-mortem examination.
But inexplicably, no autopsy was ever performed on Rhonda Stahl.
None.
A healthy young woman dies in a bizarre, violent, unwitnessed crash, and the authorities just sign the paperwork and say, accident. How does a state trooper legally justify bypassing an autopsy on a violent, unwitnessed death?
It comes down to the legal mechanics of rural jurisdictions in the 1980s. In counties without a dedicated, centralized medical examiner's office, a local justice of the peace or a responding state trooper often had vast discretion.
So they just got to choose.
Pretty much. If they looked at a scene and deemed the cause of death obvious, like a car crash, they could legally waive the requirement for an autopsy to save the county money and, spare the family grief.
Wow.
It was a loophole that allowed for immense laziness and, in some cases, catastrophic cover-ups.
It's a recurring theme in this town. The total abdication of investigative duty. No autopsy for Rhonda, a rubber-stamped suicide for Rowena, and a botched surface-level investigation for Melody.
It's like a small-town Venn diagram where all the tragic circles overlap on Cooper Cherry. Yet he constantly avoids any serious police scrutiny.
Why was this one man seemingly untouchable?
To understand the why, we have to examine the sociology of a small Texas town in that era. According to Rowena's ex-husband, Thomas, Cooper didn't just come from an average local family. He came from highly prominent, entrenched local money.
Old Texas oil and ranch money.
More than just wealth, it was structural power. His father owned multiple oil wells, a massive ranch, and crucially, he sat on the board of the powerful town bank.
And in a small town, that's everything.
In a municipality of that size, sitting on the bank board means you control the financial lifeblood of the community. You approve the loans for the local small businesses. You approve the municipal funding.
So they have real leverage.
You quite literally vote on whether the police department gets the budget for new cruisers next year or whether a local deputy gets approved for a mortgage on his first home.
That dynamic creates an invisible shield.
Exactly. The authorities are inherently disincentivized from looking too closely at the son of the man who holds the purse strings.
It's not necessarily that there was some grand cinematic conspiracy taking place in a smoke-filled room. It operates on a much quieter, more insidious level.
It is the path of least resistance. A deputy stands in an apartment, sees a rope, sees a broken window, and knows that one narrative leads to a quiet afternoon of paperwork, while the other narrative leads to dragging a bank board member's son into an interrogation room for murder.
They chose the quiet afternoon.
And when law enforcement consistently takes the path of least resistance, predators are allowed to operate with absolute impunity. 3 dead women, all intersecting with one man's life and none of it properly investigated.
Let's take a step back and look at the sheer weight of what we've uncovered today. What was officially recorded in the archives as a shameful, bizarre suicide by a lazy sheriff was, in reality, a violently chaotic crime scene. We have ignored evidence, defensive wounds, bloody fingernails, a barricaded door, a wet shower, and we have a trail of 3 dead women, all leading back to a protected local figure.
And amidst all the forensic analysis and the discussions of small-town sociology, we really can't lose sight of the human element here. Behind the police reports was a person. Rowena was a young mother.
She loved her son, Brandon.
She had her whole life ahead of her, and she was violently robbed of it by someone who thought they could get away with it, and who, so far, has.
But her family refuses to let the official narrative stand. Jolita has launched a petition to get Fayette County to simply change the death certificate from suicide to homicide.
That single piece of paper is the necessary legal key.
Right. If the cause of death is officially changed to homicide, it legally forces the authorities to reopen the case. It forces them to open the boxes they sealed 40 years ago and look at the evidence they actively ignored.
History is only permanent if we refuse to challenge it. By looking at cases like this critically, by analyzing the forensics that were swept under the rug, we honor the victims and we demand accountability from the systems that failed them.
Which brings us back to where we started. The magic trick where you finally see the wires. I want to leave you with a chilling thought to mull over as you go about your day. If a prominent family name and a path of least resistance police force could so easily write off Rowena's violently obvious murder as a bizarre solo accident and Rhonda's death as just a sleepy car crash without even bothering to perform an autopsy, how many other accidents in small towns across the country during that era are actually undiscovered murders?
It makes you wonder,
How many killers are still hiding in dusty, unread archives, just waiting for a grieving sister to finally request the files, look at the evidence, and see the wires holding the lie together? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, stay sharp, and we'll see you next time.